Jen, do you remember like field trips and bus rides?
Yes, my favorite in the world.
I remember taking the bus every single day, paying my dues. And this was like the public school bus. So there would always be like kids from our school and they would be just screaming and yelling. And I remember this one time in the back, because we were the cool kids that sat in the back, but I would just like sing opera.
Opera?
Yep, like opera, like kind of opera. Don't know why, but I did it. But that was a really defining part of school for me. But there was also this other time where we got in so much trouble on this bus. And I can't remember if you rode on the same bus as us.
No, me and Redacted. I don't know if I want to say her name. We're on a different bus. You were with Julia. I don't know if we should say her name or not, but
I was with Julia.
no, that's what I said. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, you were. It was weird because we lived really close to each other.
yeah, that is really weird.
Anyways,
Yeah, c'est la vie, we didn't ride on the same bus. So you were not present for this. But there's this one time we got in a huge amount of trouble. And it all started when we had these pieces of paper. And we were like, okay, it'd be really funny if we all like rolled down half of our windows and like just continued our normal screaming. But this time we like had signs that said SOS and help us, we've been kidnapped. And we put it all over like the windows and we were just like screaming our little heads off, being like, help. And
my
then
God.
people like ended up calling the police because of it. And I just remember the bus driver was like, she was just like head in her hands, like, God damn, these little crappy kids just causing a scene. At the time, we didn't realize the serious implications of it, but it was quite serious to indict our bus driver with kidnapping. So,
Dude, that. Oh my God.
I mean, talk about a crappy day at like work, Oh, honey,
Yeah.
I'm home. Yeah. It was kind of an okay day. A bunch of like 30 kids said I kidnapped them. It was fine. But she was our bus driver for like the remainder of our time there. And as far as I know, she still drives buses and she hasn't kidnapped anyone. So like good on her.
Oh my God, I feel so bad for her.
I feel so bad too. But the reason why I'm telling you this story is because sometimes it's good that people want to help out as much as possible, and especially when, even though kids are causing like a scene and it might be like a serious thing, because in the quiet farming community of Chowchilla, there was a routine class field trip for 26 children between 5 and 14. They all came from the same elementary school. It's like one of those ones where you have like kind of like a blended assortment of students, a whole hodgepodge of hormones, all trapped in the same building. And they were going to go to the local swimming pool and give it a good splash. And they were driven by the 55-year-old bus driver named Frank Edward, but he was just known as Ed, and they were traveling along a country road when all of a sudden they were stopped abruptly. 3 perpetrators had driven a van into the middle of the road and forced them to stop. They were then buried and held captive. This is the story
Ooh.
of the Chowchilla bus kidnapping. Hi, and welcome to the Decomposing Flowers podcast. We're excited to have you here with us as we delve into some truly intriguing and, yes, occasionally disturbing true crime cases. I'm your host, Kira, and with me is Jen. I also have my birds in the background that will make squawking noises occasionally. Everything we say in our podcast are information we have gathered from testimonies, interviews, documents, and trustful sources. Any opinion we say is our own, and any individuals in this case are innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. I can still say my own opinion, though. If we get any information wrong, please feel free to let us know in the comments. We mean no disrespect to the victims. We're just here to spread awareness and to talk about these things. Today, we're going to be talking about the Chowchilla bus kidnapping. And before we get started, I just want to give a quick disclosure about maybe like a little bit of child cruelty. It's just about a bus kidnapping, but I swear things are going to be okay. Maybe just like not so much body ouchies, but like psychological ouchies.
I'm imagining a therapist saying it like that.
psychological distress is the word I meant to say, but ouchies just came naturally to me. But if any of that is upsetting or you feel unsafe to listen, check out our other episodes, go grab yourself a bubble tea, and take care of yourself. For the rest of us, make sure you pull up those snacks. This one is not necessarily going to be our longest episode, but we have a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. The events of July 15th, 1976 unfolded in a quiet farming town community of Chowchilla in California. The day began like any other. It was a routine summer class field trip for 26 children between the ages of 5 and 14 from Dairyland Elementary School. Like I said in the beginning, it was just normal. It's something we do every single year. Their destination was the local fairgrounds swimming pool, which was a typical summer outing in the Central Valley. Their journey home, however, would be anything but ordinary. They're all packed on this bus. They all have their swimsuits on and their towels on. You know that kind of uncomfortable feeling when you have like chlorinated clothing just stuck close to you and you feel like kind of crusty, kind of dirty. And I don't know about you guys, but I always feel like really hungry after I go swimming. So like I'm just filled with an insatiable craving for sun chips that I need to immediately quench. I'm sure they didn't crave sun chips, but that's just me. They began driving home at 4 p.m. The bus driver, like I said, was 55-year-old Frank Edward, who went by Ed, and they were traveling along a country road just in the county as their path was blocked. A van, which was driven by 3 perpetrators, positioned itself directly in the bus's way, forcing Ed to stop. From the van emerged 3 masked men. Their faces were concealed by nylon stockings, and they were armed with weapons. So imagine you're one of these kids. You're looking outside the window. You know, it's just the countryside. We're seeing like hills, valleys. I spy with my little eye. Something that's green. Okay, grass. Okay, let's keep going. All right, I spy with my little eye something that's red. Okay, a barn. Easy enough. I spy with my little eye a white van. Oh, okay, a white van. A white van full of criminals that are going to come kidnap us? I think it would feel like something maybe out of like a story, you know?
Yeah, that sounds
Like,
scary.
I think I would refuse to believe that that was actually happening.
Like, that would just be so scary, like, just as a kid. But, like, as a kid, oh,
Like, I would kind of imagine like it would be something put on by like the school, you know, in a way,
yeah.
to be like, oh, we're just gonna be celebrating someone doing an amazing thing in the community, or hey, you did really good on your report card. How about we throw you a surprise party? Woohoo! But sadly, no, this was real. And so the sudden appearance of these criminals kind of immediately after a while plunged the children and the bus driver into a terrifying ordeal as the perpetrators swiftly took control of the situation. One man pointed a gun at Ed while the other took control of driving the bus. The third man followed them behind, like he was driving the van behind the bus. So even if Ed had knocked the driver criminal out, they still weren't gonna be out of the woods anytime soon. They had one pointing a gun at the kids, one pointing a gun at himself, so he couldn't move if he wanted to. One driving the bus, and one was right behind. The children were stunned and frightened and were now at the mercy of their captors. The kidnappers drove the bus a short distance before diverting it into a dry riverbed, concealing it within a tree bush approximately 9 miles west of Chowchilla. I just want to point out the act of hiding the bus in like these bushes suggests, and it's not necessarily that it suggests, it is a deliberate attempt to erase their tracks and delay any discovery of the abduction. With that said, we're continuing. The bus now hidden, the perpetrators forced the terrified children and Ed to transfer into 2 locked and darkened vans. Survivors of this account recall the fear and confusion as they were herded from the school bus into the ominous and leering vans. The kidnappers had made crude modifications to the vans and installed wooden paneling and blacked out the windows, effectively creating makeshift jails on wheels. No one could see in, and most importantly, no one else could see out. This detail really kind of highlights the level of planning involved as the perpetrators sought to isolate and control a large group of their victims during the whole journey. The vans embarked on a lengthy drive, covering approximately 100 miles to the California rock and gravel quarry in Livermore. This distance also, again, indicates a calculated effort to transport the victims to a remote and controlled location, far away from their initial starting point. So the victims in this case are 26 children, which are as young as 5, and the bus driver, Ed. At 55, Ed carried the whole responsibility of ensuring their safe passage home, and this was accelerated by the kidnapping. He was in charge of all 26 of these lives, and he was determined to make sure they got home. After a long and distressing journey in the vans, the victims were forced into an even more terrifying situation. In the early hours of July 16th, they were made to climb through a hole in the ground into a moving van that had been buried in a rock quarry. This truck trailer, which measured approximately 26.5 by 8 feet, or some sources say 8 by 16 feet, became their underground prison. The kidnappers converted a trailer into a bunker with some kind of rudimentary ventilation and a pit toilet. I'll put up pictures on the screen right now of what they look like if you're one of our YouTube audience. But it wasn't going to work for a long time. They stocked it with a minimal amount of food and water, which included cereal, peanut butter, and loaves of bread. All you need for growing children. Once all the victims were inside, the kidnappers removed the ladder they had used for entry and sealed the hatch with a heavy piece of sheet metal, which was weighed down by 2 100-pound industrial batteries before burying the opening, effectively entombing everyone inside. Inside the buried trailer, victims were crippled by immeasurable fear and distress. The darkness and confinement created a claustrophobic and psychologically damaging environment. Some of the younger children vividly remembered the terrifying moments of being forced into the hole, with one survivor, Jody, recounting a fear that she holds to this day, with the shotgun being placed to her stomach. She can still feel it to this day. The initial hours were marked by sheer terror, with at least one of the children believing that they were going to be killed one by one as they were taken out of the vans and shot executioner style. As time wore on, the conditions inside the trailer began to deteriorate. And it wasn't necessarily oh yeah, we ran out of bread. Okay. It was oh, the ventilation system keeps turning on and off. Oh, the toilet, it's overfilling. Everything is filling with shit. Oh, and most importantly, the roof is caving in. While most of the children didn't suffer severe physical injuries to this point beyond cuts, bruises, and burns, but they suffered severe psychological trauma that would be profound and long-lasting. So let's get into why. The individuals responsible for this shocking crime were 3 young men, James Schrotenfield, Richard Schrotenfield, and Frederick Newhall Woods, the 4th or the 5th. I don't know how to read Roman numerals. At the time of the kidnapping, James and Frederick were both 24 years old, while Richard was 22. So 2 were brothers, and then James and his friend were 24 years old. Their backgrounds were a pretty stark contrast to the nature of their crime. All 3 of them came from wealthy families. Woods was the son of the owner of the California rock and gravel quarry, where the victims were actually being held, granting him unrestricted access to the location. The Schrotenfield brothers, well, their father was a well-regarded podarist. Basically, he dealt with plants. Notably, they had prior convictions for motor vehicle theft, but that wasn't really you don't go from oh, I stole someone's bicycle to, yeah, I kidnapped 26 children overnight, you know? The motive behind the meticulously planned kidnapping was financial gain. They sought a $5 million ransom, which approximately is $27 million in today's inflation. Their intended use for this money was to restore a kind of mansion house in Mountain View, California. The house was called the Victorian Riggerhoff House. This seemingly weird-ass goal added a bizarre dimension to their whole reason for doing this. Okay, you want to redo some tile in someone's kitchen. why the fuck are you stealing children to do this?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Like,
Yeah, put two and two together. So James later stated that despite their privileged backgrounds, both him and Woods were deeply in debt. In a candid explanation of their choice of victims, Schoenfield revealed their calculated logic. We needed multiple victims to get multiple millions, and we picked children because children are precious. The state would be willing to pay a ransom for them, and they'll fight back. They're vulnerable. It's okay. They won't mind. This statement exposed their deeply disturbing level of premeditation and a callous regard for the level of, well, care for their young victims. The kidnappers had devised a detailed plan for the ransom delivery. They intended that the money would be dropped from an airplane into the Santa Cruz Mountains at night, where they would retrieve it under the cover of darkness like a fucking little burglar. Honestly, I'm imagining like some like Monopoly man just like roaming around in the woods being like, ooh, my money, in like the mountains. Like, it's so stupid. However, their carefully laid plans would begin to unravel almost immediately. The overwhelming media attention that they did not expect for stealing children, and the frantic calls from the worried parents jammed the phone lines to the police department. This unforeseen consequence prevented the kidnappers from issuing their ransom demand in the immediate aftermath of the abduction. So they're trying to call the police, being like, hey, we have all these kids. You want to pay us $5 million and you can have them back? But all these kids' parents are like, my kids didn't come home. The bus drivers must have stolen them, or he drove somewhere. Where are my kids? They don't know what to do.
oh my god.
Yeah. And so then they took a nap because this was really hard on them. And by then, they had discovered what I'm going to talk about next. So after enduring 16 hours of being buried underground, they knew they needed to get out. The roof was caving in. The ventilation system was turning off. I mean, you have 27 people living and breathing underneath the ground. Oxygen is going to go really, really quick. People have peed their pants. People were out of food. We're almost out of water. They're not going to last that long. For as long as it takes to get this ransom plan going, they're not going to last. And so it was between Ed and a couple of the older children, but they began to work together to figure out a way to get out of this prison. So there were a couple of like weak points. Obviously, the part where the roof started caving in was a weak point, but their efforts focused on a hatch that had been sealed, and they stacked mattresses that were inside the trailer, using them as a makeshift platform to reach the heavy covering. Ed managed to lift the hatch, revealing a sliver of hope. However, the opening was still obstructed by the heavy metal sheet and the substantial 100-pound industrial batteries. It was then 14-year-old Michael Marshall displayed a remarkable amount of bravery and resourcefulness. As Ed held the hatch open, Marshall wedged a piece of wood into the opening, preventing it from falling back down. This action allowed them to move the heavy sheet of metal and the batteries, which cleared the way for them to get out. But their ordeal was not over yet. A large reinforced plywood box still obstructed their path to freedom. Undeterred, Michael took the lead, as it was kind of easier for him to get up there and maneuver. I mean, Ed, he's 55. He's a little bit of an older man. He wasn't going to be able to get up and protect the children. And so Michael took it on himself to get up. And he persistently digged and pounded on the box until it gave away. I believe in one interview he said that he lost some fingernails and he had splinters all over his hands, but he did it. And he thought, if we're going to die, we're going to die getting the hell out of here. Finally, after the long and terrifying ordeal, Ed and the children were slowly able to climb their way out of the bunker. They emerged into the darkness and climbed their way to the rock quarry. But this wasn't the end of their terror. They didn't know where their kidnappers were. Maybe they were just standing over the hole where they had buried them with guns pointed at them, just waiting for them to come out. Oh, yay, you survived. Okay, here's your bullet prize. You know? Like, they were terrified coming out of these things, but they kind of crept alongside the road, and it was at 8 p.m. when they were greeted by stunned workers. Here's all these dirty children and this bus driver that they had seen on the news, and they're like, holy shit, what are you guys doing here? And so it was 8 p.m. on July 16th when they made their way to the guard shack Law enforcement was immediately notified, and the children and the bus driver were taken to Santa Fe Rehabilitation Center, where they were thankfully found to be in good condition. The following day, they were escorted back to Chowchilla by a police bus and arrived shortly after dawn, where they were joyously reunited with their relieved families. The scene was chaotic, with news cameras and reporters swarming the small town. While Ed was widely hailed as a hero for his actions during the kidnapping and escape, Michael was also, recognized for his heroic action as well. His courage and decisive actions in the final stages of escape were crucial for their freedom, and it was really them two that kind of shined after the aftermath. So they escaped, and when the perpetrators went back to the scene, they're like, wait, I see all these cop cars. That's where we buried the people, right? Yeah. Oh, well, shit. So the escape of the victims triggered an immediate and intensive investigation to apprehend these perpetrators. The search quickly focused on Frederick Woods as his family owned the quarry where the victims were discovered. Investigators executed a warrant to search the 100-acre valley estate of the Woods' father, where they discovered a rough draft of the $5 million ransom note, which was a crucial piece of evidence which linked the younger Woods to the crime. Authorities issued an all-points bulletin for the arrest of Frederick Woods and his two friends, James and Richard, 8 days after the kidnapping. Richard, accompanied by his attorney and his father, voluntarily surrendered to the authorities in Oakland on July 23rd. The search for the other two continued, culminating to Woods' capture in Vancouver, of all places, on July 29th, and James in Melano Park on the same day, where he was reportedly preparing to surrender. The legal proceedings that followed were extensive. Due to the intense media coverage in the county where the kidnapping occurred, a judge ordered the trial to be moved to a different county on November 5th, in July of the next year. Woods and Schoenfield pled guilty to 27 counts of kidnapping for ransom and robbery. However, they refused to plead guilty to the charge of inflicting bodily harm, as a conviction on that count combined with the kidnapping charge carried the mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. The three men were subsequently tried on the body harm charge, and on December 15th, a Superior Court judge found them guilty of 3 counts of kidnapping with bodily harm and imposed the mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole. This conviction, however, was later overturned, which stated that physical injuries sustained by the children, which were mostly cuts and bruises, did not meet the legal requirement for bodily harm under law. Following this reversal, the trio was resentenced in January 15th of 1981 to life in prison with the possibility of parole. This change in sentence would pave the way for numerous parole hearings in the decades to come. So, the possibility of parole for the 3 kidnappers made a long and emotionally charged process that spanned for several decades. Richard Schoenfield was the first to be granted parole in June of 2012 after serving 36 years for his role in the crime. 3 years later, in August of 2015, his role James was also paroled. After serving 39 years, Frederick Woods faced the most resistance from the parole board. He was repeatedly denied parole on multiple occasions, with reasons cited including the continued minimization of his crimes and disciplinary infractions for possessing contraband, such as pornography and cell phones. It was also revealed in 2016, a workers' compensation lawsuit, that Woods had been running several businesses, including a gold mine and a car dealership, from behind bars without notifying prison authorities. So he was just trying to make the most bang for his buck, I guess, when he was back there. By October 2019, he had been denied parole 19 times. However, in a significant development, in March 2022, a parole panel recommended Woods for parole. This recommendation required approval from the full parole guard. So even Governor Gavin Newsom initially asked the board to reconsider, but they were like, nah, it's good. Finally, on August 17th of 2022, Frederick Woods was granted parole and released from prison at the age of 70 after serving 46 years. The numerous parole hearings were agonizing for the survivors. Jody, who was a survivor at 10 years old at the time of the kidnapping, attended nearly all of the 60 parole hearings and even testified at some. She
Wow.
described the process as excruciating and noted each time it brought up new triggers and she was forced to relive through her traumas and fears. Granting parole to each of the kidnappers further brought pain and disappointment to the victims, who felt justice had not been served. The Chowchilla bus kidnapping had a profound and lasting impact, particularly on their psychology. A study conducted after the incident showed that survivors experienced a range of debilitating symptoms, including panic attacks, reoccurring nightmares centered on kidnapping and death, and notably personality changes. Many of them developed fears about everyday things like cars, the dark, wind, and even household items like pantyhose. Tragically, some victims still continue to grapple with the long-term effects of their trauma, including, relying to things like substance abuse and depression, even decades after the event. Jody, again, describes how the kidnapping has affected her everyday life, impacting her relationships with her family and her sense of self. But the community of Chowchilla also helps support the survivors. While the initial response of support was kind of overwhelming in a way, there was a trip to Disneyland intended to give them some respite from the trauma. This event still left an enduring scar on the town's collective memory. Over the years, they wanted to honor the victims and the heroism displayed during the escape, and so they have a granite monument dedicated to the victims that stands adjacent to the Chowchilla Police Department, marking the place where they were reunited with their families. It's really sad, but the city also declared February 26th as Edward Ray Day to commemorate his heroic actions. He ended up passing away in 2012 at the age of 91, having remained a local hero in the eyes of the community. The Chowchilla bus kidnapping remains a stark and unsettling event in American history. The meticulously planned abduction of 26 children and their bus driver for a ransom of $5 million, which ultimately proved unsuccessful and left them with lasting trauma, was, pointless. And then the legal proceedings following after also impacted the survivors. It just kind of serves as a powerful reminder of the vulnerability of children and the resilience of our spirit and the long shadow that a violent crime can cast to individuals for over decades. And that's kind of where we're at in today's case. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and we'll see you in the next episode.